The Reaper's Wager is a Drukhari cabal fused with the mercurial madness of the Alekins. At its heart stands Malachor Homunculus, an architect of suffering, who regards the battlefield not as a place of war, but as his own laboratory. Beside him is Rax, 5 disciples of fleshcraft, rendered incapable of anything beyond serving their master in pain. Above the rider, 10 witches strain like hounds on a razor-wire leash. Gladiator killers from Comora, hungry for blood and glory. Behind them advance the Kronos and the Talos, constructs of fused flesh and dark iron. The former drains life essence of its victims, the latter simply destroys. The Ravager eliminates heavy threats with cold precision, while the venom darts through the shadow like a poison needle. And then, the Alekins, 2 troops of 10, resplendent and lethal, killing with absolute grace. Every death is a step, every scream a note, in a symphony only the laughing god can hear. Alright, against them, the Tyranid invasion fleet does not form an army in any human sense. At the pulsing core of the swarm looms the Hive Tyrant, a living synaptic node, the wheel of the Hive mind made fleshing chitin. At the vanguard of pure violence, a screamer killer advances like an avalanche of claws and gaping maws, predatory instinct elevated to an art form. Behind it, the exocrine train its bioplasma cannon like an unblinking eye. The Pyrowar and the Biowar complete the fire support, spreading death at range. The swarm infantry is a tide that cannot be stemmed. 6 Tyranid warriors advance relentlessly, bioweapons in hand. 5 Barbagons to swarm at their flanks, claws trembling with hunger. Ten Termagants saturate the battlefield like a plague, fast, merciless, and countless. And in the shadows, hidden, waiting, the swarm's reserves. A lictor, silent assassin already moving and seeing through the undergrowth. A winged Tyranid prime, aerial predator that falls from the sky like a death sentence, and 3 Raveners, serpentine engines of chitin and blades, ready to tear apart any defensive line from within. In this skirmish, the commanders have chosen the mission known as Linchpin, an imperial schema obsessed as always with holding ground at all costs. From the second battle round onward, if a warlord fails to hold the objective in their own deployment zone, they claw back just 3 victory points for every other objective scattered across the field. But if they do secure that home objective, the reward swells. 3 points for their own ground, and 5 more for every additional objective they dominate, up to a maximum of 15. The Administratum would call it efficient incentive structure. I call it another way to die for some poor souls in the mud. Vorgath IX was never truly a world. Not in any sense the Imperium would bother to save. Roots as vast as Imperial bastions have shattered walls that once withstood sieges, and strangled the rusting hulks of war machines. Abandoned by campaigns the Administratum misfiled centuries ago. Grey spores choke the air in a milky suffocating haze that burns the lungs and blinds the organs, turning every breath into an act of faith. Sunlight never reaches the soil here. It seeps through the canopy like a prayer. A prayer the Emperor stopped hearing long ago. Pale and useless. But the jungle is not the only predator in this green hell. Deep within its bowels is something worse that nature calls and advances. A Tyranid vanguard swarm. A living tendril of a cosmic hunger so vast that the very idea of resistance becomes a joke. Creatures owned by eons of predatory evolution slip through the foliage without stirring a single leaf, stacking their claim with sleek biosecretion and silent synaptic pulses that no living thing can sense, unless it already belongs to the swarm. They are not here for war, not yet. They are here to measure, to catalogue, to prepare this carcass of a world for the great digestion to come. Vorgath IX shudders and breathes and rots, blissfully unaware it is already dead. Turn 1. Command phase. The Reaper's Wager selects his secondary missions with the cold certainty of those who have already written the enemy's epitaph. No prisoners, and extend battle lines. Not objectives, promises. Each faction holds one common point. Malachor extends his taloned fingers toward the battlefield, savoring with the homunculus senses the latent pain that fills the air. But the swarm is still too distant, too cold, too alien, to be fully drained. He gains a single pain token. For now. Movement phase. The venom darts like a needle through the dark, covering 20 inches between the ruins at a speed that defies perception, settling upon the lateral objective and planting the Cabal's sigil into the heart of contested territory. Extend battle lines draw its first breath. Malachor is Rax, and the Talos take position on the central objective with the solemnity of those who are in no hurry, because they know the enemy will come to them. The Chronos, the River, and both units of Harlequins advance through the shadows of the ruins, silent as wicked thoughts, using every fallen stone and shattered trunk as natural cover. The jungle conceals them. The Ravager slides into the darkness of a crumbling ruin and locks its aim onto a shape hidden within the dense undergrowth. The Pyrovore. It tracks it. It studies it. Shooting phase. 3 antimatter cannons rotate as one. The Ravager opens fire. 2 of 3 shots find their mark, and that is enough. The Pyrovore has no time to scream. A blinding flash, a heatwave that bends the surrounding vegetation, and what a moment ago was a biological war beast is now a cloud of ash and organic vapor dissolving between the fronts. The jungle itself seems to shudder. First blood flows. The first point belonged to the Reaper's Wager. Ends of turn 1. Reaper's Wager. No prisoners, 2 points. Extend battle lines, 4 points. Primary points, 0. Secondary points, 6. Command phase. The swarm does not choose, the swarm calculates. Secondary missions crystallize within the Hive mind like firing synapses. Engage and deny the area. Every movement will be another tooth biting deeper into enemy territory. Both factions now hold 2 command points. to game Titans. Movement phase. The Tyranid warriors and the Exocrine advance toward the central objective like an unstoppable biological tide. The Hive Tyrant watches from behind, its synaptic aura onslaught, pulsing like a black heart. Prearranged organs remain calibrated and lethal, even as limbs hammer the muddy ground. The swarm spend a precious stratagem, command reroll, attempting to push the Tyranid warriors beyond their limit. But the jungle is dense, roots betray, and the warriors fails to close the distance. The Exocrine does it for them. Its colossal mass crushes onto the central objective with brutality. The Hive Tyrant positions itself behind them like a thinking shadow, amplifying every synapse of the swarm through its mere presence. On the left flank, the Barbagans sleep between ruins choked by Vorgath IX's vegetation, advancing toward the objective with unnatural stealth. They halt at close range from the enemy infiltrator already entrenched on the point, watching it, smelling it, waiting. The Termagants move silently toward the objective in the Tyranid deployment zone, swarming like insects over a carcass, consolidating territorial control with the merciless efficiency of creatures that know no other purpose. The Scream Killer and the Biovore hold their ground, patient, lethal. Shooting phase. The Biovore raises its spore mine launcher toward the leaden sky of Vorgath IX and spits a spore mine into a strategic quadrant of the battlefield. The biological capsule lands silently among the vegetation, a flesh and venom time bomb already pulsing with a life of its own. The swarm claims its first point on engage. The Exocrine swings its bioplasma cannon toward the Ravager concealed among the ruins. The energy discharge is devastating, a visceral explosion that tears through the stone cover like paper. 6 wounds rip through the Drukhari vehicle's frame. But the Ravager holds, gravely crippled. 5 remaining wounds screaming in twisted metal. It remains standing, wounded, still dangerous. The Hive Tyrant turns its armor head toward a Harlequin troop concealed in the vegetation and opens fire with its aerial weapons. The jungle erupts in a storm of bioprojectiles and toxic pollen. Four dancers fall, their bodies dissolving in blood and poisoned spores. The survivors do not waver. Harlequins do not know grief. They only know the next move. The Tyranid warriors finally concentrate fire on the venom entrenched in the bunker, unleashing a hail of bioprojectiles that should have reduced it to smoldering wreckage. But the small craft is fast, elusive, built to survive exactly this kind of storm. Four wounds disfigure it. 2 remaining wounds keep it alive. Operational, on the objective, for now. End of turn 1. Engage, 2 points. Deny the area, 5 points. Primary points, 0. Secondary points, 7. Turn 2. Command phase. Both players gain 1 command point, but the Reaper's Wager immediately spends 1 to pass the Battle Shock test for the Venom, still clinging for the lateral objective with its last 2 wounds. The Drukhari remain at 2 command points, the Tyranids rise to 3. Malachor reaches out once more across the battlefield, seeking to extract pain from the swarm's creatures, but once again, the biological coldness of the Tyranids resists his pain adaptability. No new tokens. New secondaries are drawn from the deck of faith, behind enemy lines and attempting target. But Malachor rejects the latter. Too risky. Too uncertain. He spends another command point to discard it and shuffle Destiny anew. In its place, storm hostile objective. As for the primary mission, by controlling both the objective in their deployment zone and another one in no man's land, the Drukhari scored a solid 8 points. The Drukhari have traced their plan. Now they must execute it. Movement phase. The Venom, damaged, wavering yet unstoppable, darts forward into the enemy deployment. It halts near the Screamer Killer, a suicidal move for any other vehicle. But the Drukhari know no caution. They use their last command point to activate this scintillating tempo stratagem, wrapping the Venom in a whirlwind of speed and holograms that confuses the swarm's senses. Overwatch fire never comes. 3 points on behind enemy lines already secured. The Talos advances toward the center of the field like a mountain of flesh and metal in motion, bringing itself into both firing and charging range against the Tyranid creatures entrenched on the central objective. The Harlequins sleep silently behind the central bastion, invisible until they choose not to be. The Kronos move toward the center, sheltering behind an enormous rock, a perfect position for supporting fire. The Rider, carrying the witches and the other Harlequin troop, streak leftward, seizing the lateral objective in the Drukhari deployment. But the Tyranid warriors on the central objective have seen them. The warriors spent a command point to fire Overwatch stratagem. A hail of bioprojectiles tears through the air. One Harlequin falls, dissolving in a whirl of impossible colors. The Rux and the Ravager take aim among the ruins, calibrating their weapons for the coming shooting phase. And it is precisely at this moment that the Swarm plays its hidden card. A command point is spent, the ground trembles, 3 Raveners erupt from the depth of Vorgath IX like serpents from the underworld, materializing exactly where the Ravager and the Rex are positioned. The ambush is perfect. Shooting phase. The Ruks react immediately, opening fire on the newly emerged Raveners, vaporizing the nearby spore mines but failing to scratch the serpentine creatures themselves. The Raveners are intact. The Talos train its heat lances on the exocrine entrenched on the central objective, and nothing. The weapons jam. An impossible malfunction. A cruel joke of fate. The exocrine remains unscathed. It falls to the Ravager then, to deal with the threat. Its dark lenses rotate toward the colossal Tyranid creatures, now enhanced by the rapid regeneration stratagem, granting it a feel no pain of 5+. The Ravager opens fire. 4 wounds pierce the chitinous armors of the exocrine. But the beast regenerates, tissues knitting together, biomass recomposing. The Raider's dark lance joins the barrage. 4 more wounds. 8 total wounds out of 14. The exocrine wavers, but does not fall. The remaining fire from the Kronos and the Witches is lost against the creature's biological mass without inflicting further damage. The towering beast remains standing, immobile as a living mountain. Charge! Fight phase! The Talos charges the exocrine with the fury of a construct designed to annihilate. Its enormous gauntlets crash down upon the creature, claws that have torn apart battle tanks, fists that have pulverized bunkers. But the exocrine is too massive, too resilient. The blows glance off. The chitinous flesh absorbs the impact. The exocrine remains on the central objective with 6 wounds remaining. End of turn 2. Reaper's Wager. The Drukhari failed to score Storm Hostile objective. The secondary is immediately discarded to recover 1 command point to the pool. Behind enemy lines, 3 points. Storm Hostile objective, 0 points, discarded for 1 command point. Primary points, 8. Secondary points, 9. Command phase. Both players gain one common point. The Tyranids drop to 1 and the Drukhari rise to 2. The swarm draws its secondaries from the deck of fate. No prisoners and established locus. The Exocrine, gravely wounded but still functional, faces the battle shock test and passes it easily thanks to the Tyranid ability to reroll 3d6 and discard the lowest result. Terror does not exist, and fear is an alien concept to the swarm. As for the primary mission, the Tyranids control the objective in their deployment zone and 2 objectives in no man's land. The swarm grip Titans to a stranglehold. 13 primary points are scored in a single turn. A wave of biomass suffocating enemy resistance. Movement phase. The Barbagons advance into the forest and consolidate on the lateral objective, swarming between carnivorous routes with a natural synergy. The Raveners slither forwards over the ruin in enemy deployment, ready to strike the Drukhari rear. Serpents of chitin and hunger waiting for the perfect moment to bite. The Biovore takes position in the swarm rear lines, observing the field with cold indifference. The Screamer Killer closes dangerously on the wounded Venom. The Tyranid warriors position themselves, defending the central objective, bioweapons aimed and ready. The Hive Tyrant also advances deeper into the heart of the conflict, positioning itself for both shooting and melee. Shooting phase. The Biovore fires first, hurling explosive bioprojectiles at the Harlequins hidden behind the bastion. One falls, dissolving in a cloud of colors and toxic ash. The Tyranid warriors unleash their entire monstrous volume of fire upon the remaining Harlequin squad. Bioprojectiles, bone spines, acid discharges, a deluge of biological death so dense it blots out the sun. When the storms clear, nothing remains. The Scream Killer vomits a stream of acidic flame at the raider. But the Drukhari vehicle is fast, elusive. Only one wound penetrates the armor. The Barbagons and the Hive Tyrants converge their fire on a single target, Malachor and his squad of Vraks. The sky darkens with bioprojectiles. The herd erupts in spines and acid. When the haze clears, the entire squad is destroyed. The Vraks fall like puppets with cut strings, and Malachor, the ancient one, the genius, the homunculus, who had transformed pain into art, collapses to the ground, his twisted body finally silent. Charge! Fight phase! The Hive Tyrant charges the Talos to support the Exocrine still locked in combat. The Tyrant's colossal mass crashes down upon the Drukhari construct with the force of a biological meteor. The Talos is crushed, its hybrid structure of flesh and metal crumbling under the Tyrant's blows. But even dying, the Talos does not surrender. With its last scrap of resistance, the Drukhari activate the fateful roll stratagem. The Talos attacks before dying and its gauntlets crush down upon the Exocrine with mechanical desperation. 3 wounds pierce the Chitina's armor. The Exocrine staggers, gravely wounded. Then the Talos collapses, finally dead. The Exocrine remains standing, barely, with 3 wounds remaining. The Screamer Killer charges the wounded Venom with the fury of a living avalanche. Claws as large as blades tear through the armor, gulping most to swallow the propulsion core. The Venom explodes in a flare of dark energy and glowing wreckage. End of turn 2. Invasion fleet. No prisoners, 5 points. Established locus, 0 points. Primary points, 13. Secondary points, 12. Turn 3. Command phase. Both players gain 1 command point, rising to 2 command points each. The Reapers wager draw this turn's secondaries and obtain sabotage and overwhelming force. Fate appears a path, and the Drukhari will walk it in blood. The Ravager, reduced below half strength, faces the battle shock test and passes it. The Drukhari score 3 primary points. They control a siege objective in no man's land, but it is enough. For now. Movement phase. The Ravager maneuvers its etheric sails with grace, sliding toward the Drukhari rear lines and distancing itself from the lethal threat of the Raveners, still slithering among the ruins. It positions itself carefully. Dark Lancers already train on the heart of the Tyranid deployment, the Hive Tyrant at the center of the field. The Kronos moves toward the center of the enemy deployment, its alchemical flames already primed to discharge upon the termagant brood hidden near the objective in the Tyranid deployment zone. The rider follows at short distance, its deadly cover of witches trembling for the battle to come. It positions itself slightly ahead of the Kronos, on the ruin near the Tyranid zone objective, ready to unleash its firepower on whatever remains of the enemy rear lines. And finally, the Harlequins. Thanks to their hollow suits, they pass through the bunker like ghosts walking between the walls of reality. Using the scintillating tempo stratagem, they materialize near enemy units at the center of the field without being intercepted by Overwatch fire. The Hive mind reacts immediately. The swarm knows no surprise, only adaptation. A fire Overwatch stratagem is spent to activate the exocrine's cannon on the moving Ravager. The wounded creature fires, but the anti-grav craft speed is such that the bioprojectiles don't even graze it. Shooting phase. The Kronos opens fire first, unleashing its Spirit Siphon and Spirit Vortex upon the Termagant brood. Alchemical flames engulf the creatures, incinerating 7 out of 10, bodies dissolving into ash and organic vapor. The witches inside the radar finish the job with their splinter pistols, riddling the last 3 remaining termagants. The brood is annihilated. The Harlequin troop decides to concentrate its entire arsenal on the Tyranid warrior brood at the center of the field. 4 fusion pistols and a single remaining neurodisruptor. Fire converges. The warriors, reinforced by the catalyst stratagem, resist, but not completely. 2 members fall, 1 remains gravely wounded. The Raider trains its dark lance on the wounded exocrine, and miraculously the beast survives. The shoot passes within a hair's breadth of its colossal mass. The Ravager unleashes its 3 dark lances on the Hive Tyrant. But even this fire shatters against the alien monster's reinforced chitin. The Tyrant remains unscathed, impassive as a living mountain. And it is then that the Harlequins play their most lethal card. They use the grenade stratagem, activating their electromagnetic grenades on the exocrine. The enormous alien monstrosity is engulfed by an explosion of pure energy. The exocrine explodes. Its biomass disintegrates in a storm of acid and chitinous fragments that crashes down on everything surrounding it. 2 Harlequins are consumed by the blast, their bodies dissolved. 1 Tyranid warrior is torn apart, and the Hive Tyrant, the Swarm Commander, the living synaptic node, suffers 3 devastating wounds. The jungle trembles beneath the explosion's impact. Charge, fight phase. The Harlequins and the Kronos charge the 3 remaining Tyranid warriors, wounded, isolated creatures, yet still lethal. The warriors immediately activate the Death Frenzy stratagem. Before dying, they will strike back immediately. But it doesn't matter. The troops' enormous number of attacks obliterates all the 3 warriors in a rain of blades, impossible colors, and unescapable death. But even dying, the warriors keep the Swarm's promise. Striking back with the last scrap of synaptic life, the Swarm kill 2 more Harlequins. End of turn 3. Reaper's Wager. Overwhelming Force, 5 points. Sabotage, 0 points. Discarded for 1 command point. Primary points, 11. Secondary points, 14. Command Phase. Both players gain 1 command point. The Drukhari rise to 2. The Tyranids remain at only 1. The invasion fleet draws this turn's secondaries and obtains Extend Battle Lines and Attempting Target. For the latter, the Drukhari general chooses the objective in no man's land to the left of his deployment zone, a point that must be torn away, territory that must be conquered. As for the primary mission, the Tyranids score 3 points as well, controlling a single objective in no man's land. Movement Phase. The Hive Tyrant repositioned with surgical precision, calculating firing angles and charge distances with the Hive Mind's cold logic. It prepares a clear line of fire toward the Ravager, and if necessary, to charge the Kronos in the next phase. The Barbagant Brood also repositioned to fire on the 2 remaining Harlequins, the last souls of the dancing troop. The Lictor advances in absolute silence, camouflaging itself among the eye vegetation's fronts. Invincible, patient, deadly. The brood of the 3 Raveners takes possession of the ruined house on the objective within the Drukhari deployment zone, chitinous serpents coiling among the rubble, claiming enemy territory as their own. The Biovore also takes a better position for the coming shooting phase, calibrating its biological projectile launcher with mechanical indifference. Finally, from nowhere, the Tyranid Prime lands with a deep strike. Membrano's wings folding, claws sinking into the muddy ground, it reclaims control of the objective in the Tyranid deployment zone, re-establishing the swarm's grip on contested territory. Shooting phase. The Barbagans open fire with its launchers on the two remaining Harlequins. A storm of bone spines cuts through the air, and when it clears, nothing remains. The Biovore and the Hive Tyrant attempt to intercept the elusive silhouette of the Ravager. Bioprojectiles and spores mines streak through the air, but the Drukhari craft is another time too fast, too agile. No, it's land. The Screamer Killer vomits its bioflame at the Kronos, a stream of hot acid that should reduce anything to smoking pulp. But the construct's thick metal armor holds. The acid slides off without scratching the cursed metal. Charge fight phase. The Tyrant charges the Kronos with the fury of an incarnate alien god. The Drukhari activate the murderous circus stratagem. The Tyrant's attack are disrupted, confused by holograms and unpredictable movements. But it's not enough. The Tyrant's enormous claws crash down upon the Kronos like divine judgment. The armor splits, flesh tears. Internal mechanisms explode in a cascade of steam and alchemical fluids. The Kronos is torn to death, reduced to a twisted heap of metal and biomass. End of turn 3. Extend battle lines, 4 points. Attempted target, 5 points. Primary points, 16. Secondary points, 21. Turn 4. Command phase. Both players gain 1 command point, rising to 2 command points each. The Reapers wagers draw this turn's secondaries and obtains Establish a Strong Point and Defend the Fortress. Fate offers a chance, perhaps the last. The Ravager, still reduced below half strength, should face the Battle Shock test again. But there is no time for fear, no room for hesitation. The Drukhari activates the Insane Bravery stratagem. The test is automatically passed. The Drukhari score no primary mission points. The swarm controls the field, but the battle is not yet over. Movement phase. The Ravager moves aggressively toward the Ravener brood nested among the ruins. A wounded vehicle advances like a predator that has scented blood. The dark lenses calibrate. If the Raveners survive the devastating fire, the Ravager will run them down in melee. The sole purpose: score, establish a strong point. Nothing else matters. The witches disembark from the raider with graceful ravenous leaps, gladiatorial blades reflecting Vorgath IX spectral light. Their target? the Tyranid Prime, defending and controlling the objective in the Tyranid deployment zone. Creatures born in common rags arenas, forged to kill with elegance and cruelty, and now finally unleashed. The Raider follows them closely but decides not to shoot. Instead, it performs the tactical action that will allow the faction to score defend the fortress. Shooting phase. The witches unleash their splinter pistols on the Tyranid Prime, a hail of poison needles that pierce alien chitin. Two wounds penetrate the biological armor. The Ravager trains its dark lances on the Ravener brood and opens fire. 2 out of the 3 biological serpents are vaporized in a flash of dark energy, reduced to vapor and ash in an instant. Only one remains, wounded, isolated, but still alive. Charge. Fight phase. The Ravager charges the last remaining Ravener and crushes it with all its mechanical might, activating the tank shock stratagem. The Ravener is flattened beneath the anti-grav vehicle's weight, its chitinous structure shattering like glass under a hammer. Death is instantaneous. The witches surround the Tyranid Prime like predators that have cornered their prey. Their gladiatorial blades crash down in a whirlwind of steel and cruelty. Not a quick death. Not a clean death. They subject it to infernal torment, dismembering it piece by piece, joint by joint, while the Prime desperately attempts to defend itself, but it is futile. End of turn 4. Establish strong point, 4 points. Defend the fortress, 3 points. Primary points, 11. Secondary points, 21. Command phase. Both players gain 1 command point, the Tyranids rise to 3, the Drukhari drop 1 command point only. The invasion fleet draws this turn's secondaries and demonstrates superiority and sabotage. As for the primary mission, the Swarm controls 3 objectives in no man's land, but not the one in its own deployment zone, now in enemy hands. Despite this loss, the Tyranids score 9 primary points total. Movement phase. The Screamer Killer positions itself well concealed behind a bunker on the lateral objective. From this position it can act undisturbed while proceeding with the sabotage action. No one will see it coming. No one will stop it. The wounded Hive Tyrant shifts slightly, calibrating firing angles with the mathematical precision of the Hive mind. Its target? The Witch unit currently controlling the objective in the Tyranid deployment zone alongside the Raider. The Barbagant brood moves entirely into the large forested area, slipping between carnivorous fronts with a natural synergy. Now they have a clear line of fire on the Witch unit. The trap is set. Shooting phase. The Hive Tyrant's cannon roars, an explosion of bioenergy that tears through the air like living lightning. 6 witches explode in a storm of flesh and blood, their bodies shredded by the Tyrant's biological fury. The Barbagans open fire right after, a devastating hail of bone spines and bioprojectiles that completely obliterates the witch unit. End of turn 4. Demonstrate superiority, 4 points. Sabotage, 0 points. In progress for next turn. Primary points, 25. Secondary points, 25. Turn 5. Command phase. Both players gain 1 command point, the Tyranids rise to 4 command points and the Drukhari rise to 2 command points. The Tyranid commander decides it's time to unleash warp terror upon the battlefield, a psychic wave of primal fear crashing down upon the 2 surviving Drukhari vehicles, forcing both craft to face a battle shock test. But the Drukhari are no common creatures, they are common raiders, tempered by 1,000 incursions into the webway's darkness, survivors of horrors that would shatter any mortal mind. The Ravager and the Raider face the wave of terror with cold indifference and repel it. Both vehicles pass the shock test quite easily. Remaining anchored to both conquered objectives, the Drukhari score 8 primary mission points, a final flare of resistance, a final declaration of defiance against the advancing swarm. As for secondaries, the Reaper's Wages draws from the deck and obtains Conquer No Man's Land and demonstrates superiority, and decides with one of the 2 remaining command points to try their luck by changing it to Establish Locus. Movement phase. There is no movement, the Ravager and the Raider remain on the objectives, anchored like wrecks of a ghost fleet. Shooting phase. The surviving Raider silences its gun to dedicate its attention to positioning the Locus, thus allowing the Drukhari army to score the last secondary mission points. The Ravager unleashes its entire remaining firepower on the Screamer Killer concealed behind the bunker. 3 dark lances converge on the target, beams of dark energy that should vaporize any living creature. But the Screamer Killer is not just any creature. The Tyranid monstrosities kiting proves still too resilient for the Drukhari weapons. The shots find their mark, scale shattering, flesh burning, but it's not enough. It's never enough. The beast remains standing, wounded but still lethal, and thanks to a command reroll stratagem, still operational, still alive. The fire ceases. Silence falls over the battlefield like a shroud. The Drukhari have fired everything they possessed, and the swarm is still there, impassive. End of turn 5. Conquer No Man's Land, 0 points. Establish Locus, 4 points. Primary points, 19. Secondary points, 25. Total, 44. Command phase. Both players acquire their final command points, 4 for the Tyranids, 2 for the Drukhari. The Screamer Killer completes the sabotage action begun in the previous turn. The objective structure collapses under the weight of an alien biomass reduced to unusable rubble. The Tyranid commander then draws the last 2 secondaries from the deck, cleans, and condemns the targets. As for primary points, having total control of No Man's Land, the Swarms acquires another 9 points. The battlefield no longer belongs to the Drukhari. It no longer even belongs to the jungle. It belongs to the swarm. Movement phase. The Hive Tyrant, the Lictor, and the Screamer Killer reposition strategically across the field and on the objectives. Every movement calculated with mathematical precision to maximize territorial control and complete the remaining active secondary actions. The Hive Mind orchestrates every single step like a conductor, leading a symphony of death. Shooting phase. The Hive Tyrant fires its final acidic salvo at the Ravager, a stream of bioprojectiles that should reduce the vehicle to smoking wreckage. But again, the lines of the Drukhari anti-grav craft deny any hits from landing. The Ravager dances between trajectories like a ghost mocking death. The Babagons and the Screamer Killer both complete cleanse action, marking the territory with biosecretion and synaptic signals that declare this world belongs to the swarm. The Hive Mind scores the final points. End of turn 5. Sabotage 3 points. Cleans 5 points. Condemned targets 0 points. Primary points 34. Secondary points 33. Total 67. End of battle. Tyranids 67 points. Drukhari 44 points. Victory has arrived. The swarm has taken possession of Vorgath IX immense forest. The planet is lost. Soon the rest of the Hive fleet will reach this world, and what was once life will become merely biomass to be consumed. The few surviving Drukhari, the Ravager and the Raider, damaged but still functional, retrieved the battered but still living body of Malakor from the ruins. The homunculus still breathe, albeit barely. They load him onto their vehicles and flee into the webway, returning to Commonra. They may return soon for new raids, but Vorgath IX will no longer be the same world. It will be just another devoured planet.